Sentinel Mindset.
Well, good morning, everyone. Hope you're having a fantastic day. Today, we're going to be talking about a Dollarama beatdown that happened by a security guard about a week ago. And it's something that caused a lot of concern, something that police were involved with and actually charged the security guard. And today, we have with us Steve Summerville, expert witness amongst many. He has had an incredible program through Stay Safe, putting a lot of training mechanisms that help security diffuse situations, especially when we're talking about use of force. And we're going to actually be watching a little bit of that video later on. But Steve, how are you doing today, man?
Doing great, sir. How are you?
Amazing.
Good.
So
Good to see you.
We're going to watch this video, and it's going to start off with obviously a reporter kind of segue. It's going to almost be like our reporter live on the ground,
right?
Kind of what happened. But what I wanted to ask is, just on the surface, if you can talk a little bit about what we're going to see, why everyone is getting so concerned about this, and why it's a concern for maybe other security agencies if they have security that maybe have the same kind of mindset going into work, thinking that they can do what we're about to see.
Yeah, great question. And first of all, I somewhat caution the viewers, you're going to see some violence. Be a bit forewarned with that. But what we have here is in a downtown Toronto, Queen and Sherbourne area, for those who are familiar, downtown, the streets of Toronto, we have a Dollarama. We have uniformed security, obviously in a place to somewhat vet customers coming in. There was an altercation. There's altercation, a portion of the altercation was caught on video and accumulated, and with the police arresting the individual, the security officer, for assault. The challenge would be, is this not what we expect with security? The person would appear to possibly be homeless. The issues of abuse, the level of force used, where there's allegations that not only was the person punched a number of times, we do catch that on video, but also the person was kicked in the head, the facial area, once he was down. So a lot of community are alarmed. This is not the way. Dollarama's made a news release that we don't advocate, we don't procure third-party security for purposes of force. It's almost like a watch and report, observe and report component. And this guard acted out. There's even a lawyer that will speak to here, and this is a global TV. We're going to see what Sean will say. There's a lawyer who's going to be speaking to Mr. Hadday. I actually worked with him before in matters of litigation. Speaking about the areas, there's security training, there's expectations, and that was not met.
Okay. So what we'll do is, before we get to Sean, who's live on scene,
Right.
What we want to do is just things that we'll cover is after the video is basically like best practices, right? So the segment that we do here is what would you do? This is to kind of go over that. But also I think it's very important because you just brought up the legal side of things. When legal sees this, when a prosecutor sees this, this is basically like a one case from their perspective when they look at something like this.
Well, with my life skills, I don't know if anything's a slam dunk. There could be an argument pushed back, but nothing caught. There's an alleged witness here who's obviously indicates he's a social worker as well. He viewed the item. There's another scene where a citizen tried to intervene. But I do think you have a challenge here with a defendable action from security. This would appear to be a situation where security unnecessarily and reasonably applied force on a member of the community, and now he's being arrested.
Okay, well, let's go to Sean. Sean, are you there? If you can go live on scene, let us know what's going on.
Busy East Downtown Dollarama. At any given time, a security guard stands watch inside the front door. Earlier this week, an incident involving a guard and a customer got violent.
The security guard just disconnected and started to beat his face.
Ricky Gamez saw what was happening and began recording on his phone. He says the customer had spilled coffee inside his shopping bag and wanted to come in to buy paper towels, but the guard refused him entry.
He asked nicely, twice. When he tried to get inside, the security guard dragged him out and pulled him from the shirt.
At that point, he says, the customer became defensive.
The guy spit on the guard, so the bodyguard or the security guard started to beat him like so bad. Call the 911. Call the 911.
That guard is now facing an assault charge. Dollarama told Global News Dollarama does not authorize the use of force in any situation, adding the retail chain aims to promote a store environment in which everyone must be treated with respect. Besides the guard, the retailer could be held liable for the actions of the guard, under contract from a security company.
Dollarama is the occupier of the property, and this incident happened on their premises, by someone they had employed.
Theft is a problem in stores like these, and guards are there to reduce losses. We watched a guard follow out a store patron, demanding he return something in his pocket. The guard got the goods back. but getting physical is something else.
Any average person would expect that security guards have training.
Oh, man. Wow.
We showed the video to other customers who live nearby. You don't think that's right?
Oh, of course not, hands down. If I got slapped by this, I'm going to jail. You know what I'm saying? Because that's a slap that you don't expect nobody to. That's not right, bro.
You think that's overkill?
Absolutely. You know, the guy's coming in and he's asking if he can put his bag down just to come into the store to buy some paper towel to clean up his mess.
Now, that guard left the store after the incident. He was arrested a ways away and was charged with assault, largely on the basis of that 17-second video from inside the store, the one that you just saw. He'll appear at the Ontario Court of Justice on December the 9th. Tracy.
Sean O'Shea.
All right. Well, it's not Tracy, it's Constantine and Steve, but thanks, Sean. Okay, so a lot to unbox here, Steve. So now that we've seen the video and from what we saw from the angle, the camera, timing coming on, what's your initial thoughts when you're looking at this?
Well, there again, I think it was captured well by the media segment. There is unnecessary and reasonable force administered upon that gentleman who came to the store. Could have been a patron. Whether or not he was actually going to be purchasing or stealing something, regardless, you are not legally or lawfully entitled to apply the level of force on anyone for that circumstance. There is another media clip also put up by the CBC where there's allegations that the security guard may have been spat upon.
Okay.
And in that particular video segment, a plaintiff lawyer called Jasmine Dea, I've worked with Ms. Dea in the past as well, talks about that, this is a really uncomfortable experience. It's probably one of the worst insults you could do to another human being is spit on them.
Right.
And we speak about that, as you know, in our Stay Safe training.
Right.
But as counsel Dea pointed out during that interview, you're compensated to show restraint. You're compensated, you're counted on, you seem to be vetted by your security company that you will not overreact and not let anger take over from common sense and judgment. Because a person's suspicion is not a defense. It's not a lawful explanation as to why force to that magnitude. You could have certainly arrested them. You could have held them. You could have restrained them, if so equipped with handcuffs. You could say you're under arrest for assault. I don't think anyone would challenge that. And if the person did attack the security guard, no evidence of that here, by the way, you certainly have the legal and lawful right to protect yourself. But that's not the case here. It's a couple of black eyes.
Okay. Let's talk about two things. First of all, I want to go into the use of force piece, the use of force model applied to the situation here. And we're going to do some scenarios. But the very first one is going right down to the foundation. Is it reasonable to say that anyone that comes into the world of security, law enforcement, should have a very strong understanding that they're walking into something where this could very happen, where you could be spat on or assaulted?
Absolutely, sir, 100%.
Okay, so if that is a recognized understanding, it's not like someone's, when you walk into the world, when you start saying, I'm going to work security, maybe it's because of the way the industry as a whole has adopted maybe a lot of things in place, the qualifications, the skill sets, the whole 9 yards. But for the most part, when people are coming into this job, you're not coming just to stand in a spot. You're being hired to come and either protect property or protect human life.
Yeah, property and people.
Right.
Absolutely. That's your designation under the licensing component in Province of Ontario.
Right.
But you're also governed by the Criminal Code of Canada. And in that particular context, you do have a right to protect yourself. And I'm looking for the academics who are watching this, Section 34 of the Criminal Code. Right. But it talks about your actions must be reasonable and necessary. You can't be provoked. You can't be provoked. If a person is flailing away with their fists at you, by all means, you have a reasonable right to stop that attack. Right. And restrain the person and arrest them. But in this particular case, there's video evidence with a person down on the ground, arguably not in a position to defend themselves, receiving incoming punches from the security guard's right hand. Right. And there's also allegations that the individual who saw this situation and recorded it says he even saw the security guard kicking the man in the face and the head area when he was on the ground. That's not defendable, sir.
No, absolutely. Steve, just because people, there's going to be other security or even law enforcement that are going to experience someone spitting on them, just from this. If someone spits on you on the line of work, what would you consider to be a reasonable response?
That's fair. First of all, take a deep breath.
Yeah.
Keeping in mind, you're likely where you apply your trade, where you apply your services, you're probably being recorded or there's witnesses. Right. So you need to be very, very mindful that your actions will be viewed.
It will be captured,
seen. It can be captured. That's now a court document, likely. It's going to be seen by the court. Right. So you need to take charge of yourself, sir. You need to have that composure. and you need to have the resilience at the same time to say, you're under arrest. So I reach out, I'm going to secure you. I will hold you depending on your resistance. I will control your resistance. And as I said earlier in this podcast, if you do have the mechanisms, like you get handcuffed, you call the police. I've been assaulted, I've been spat upon. And there's also resistance to hold you. That's a secondary issue.
Right.
But the other issue is there's nothing there that would justify you're launching a physical attack to gain control. That's the area, sir, that security companies are mindful of.
Yes.
Police are mindful of. When police would come to this particular location, by the way, I used to police in this particular location, right down at Queen and Sherburne, steps away from Dollarama. There's a men's hostel just up the street on the same side of the street. Right across the street, I'm not familiar with that part of Toronto, it's the Moss Park Armories. And there's a strong, heavy presence here at the homeless community. I'm not saying that for any other reason to suggest that you also have to have compassion and empathy and professional conduct. You're dealing and working and applying your trade in an area that requires some understanding of your clientele. And, you know, even I live out in Durham Region, out in the Ajax area, and when I saw this, I mentioned to my wife that it's interesting because there's a Dollarama just up around a major area from my home, and it's just down from a school. But during the lunchtime hour, there's a staff member vetting how many school kids, like high schoolers, will be permitted into the Dollarama.
Right.
I saw adults be going without being vetted. Yep, come on in. But they were stopping students, not allowing them to go into the Dollarama LMS. Those security provisions are certainly within the place of all shopping entities.
Right.
And we respect and value that. And why? We got to look at slippage and shoplifting and whatnot. And that's sort of mass dynamic. But here that wasn't the case, sir.
No, it's not. In fact, Steve, I'm going to pull the video back here. I know we're probably only going to be able to see about 4 seconds here, but in the little that we do see, and again, for those that are listening here, a camera is going into the vestibule of the dollar store,
yes,
where you see a security guard, and there's a gentleman on the floor. It seems like he has his hands around trying to protect his head.
Yes.
We'll take a look at this right now. Okay. We'll try to like a frame by frame here. So, gentleman's on the floor.
Stop right there, Constantine. I mean, that's not to relive the obvious, and I'm not going to be insulting the viewers' intelligence by saying, oh, this is what you see. But you see the person there with his hands on the ground, maybe a slight right hand up as a defensive measure or a defensive posture. But there's no assaultive behavior and no aggressive or assertive measures on that person on the ground. There's no reason to administer a strike. If you're waiting for police attendants, even before the video kicking in, you just stand back, take a step back, and verbally tell the person what you need them to do, and you've summoned police assistance.
Right.
You're under arrest, right?
Okay.
But you need to administer force there. It's unlawful and unjust in this particular sense. And that's despite what you would see maybe possibly occurred prior to. There's a witness, a person who was interviewed saying that he saw this, and he only started filming it after a lot of blows and strikes were seen to be administered. But I think here's what's the example is when you lose your temper and you make bad decisions at the time that the rest of your life you're going to have to pay those consequences.
Absolutely. And looking at the video, there's just, in the couple of seconds that we see, there's just several blows that happen. Now, to me, these seem to be blows of anger that he was spat upon, right? And opposed to like, you know, he's defending his life. And to me, like, Steve, the thing that scares me about this, the thing that scares me about human emotion, like if I'm spat upon, what if one of those blows killed him?
Oh, well, then you're looking at a manslaughter or perhaps a homicide trial, you know, circumstantially based on actions where you lost control. You notice there in the video clip, too, there's a gentleman, not security, and I don't believe Dollarama staff, because usually Dollarama not wear uniforms, but they wear clothing identifiable to working there.
That's right.
That's been my experience. He seems to be sort of standing between. He seems a little dismayed, and I don't know if you saw the segment where security guard just turned away, but he did seem to be showing, and I can't get into the mind of another person. Who knows? It's hard to think even what I'm thinking at times, what another person is. But in this particular context, he seems to be frustrated walking away, and you see the way his hands go out to the side.
Right.
Consequentially, he messed up. I also heard reports, too, is that the security guard left the scene.
Right. And
he had to be located by police after he left the store, and he was arrested a short time after this incident.
Right. Okay. Now, there's many security companies out there that are operating without training. This is not a surprise. For anyone's listening right now, this is actually happening on a day-to-day basis. If I'm a company right now and I just saw this, I'm like, oh my God, this could happen to us. We don't have training. What are things that you would suggest, Steve, that the guard needs to have if he's going to be doing this kind of work as a training mechanism?
Awesome question. And not being self-serving, I run a training corporation. I provide training, and I get compensation for that. So often caution my family by saying anytime a person makes a profit in their opinion, be careful.
Right.
But very honestly, without that agenda in mind, security training should also speak to de-escalation and calming yourself, recognizing there's trigger points. And when we take people through a series like a managing of resistant behavior, that includes your own behavior, not allowing yourself to get to the point where you start to take actions and start to do things you normally wouldn't do. Anger is not a defense for criminality. Bad decisions sometimes may not be fueled by anger, but we also need to recognize that training can also put sometimes a little bit of a filter on your actions. You can alert a person. I have no idea whether this security company has or has not received training, by the way. Mm-hmm. But training will not defend criminal action. Training will sometimes prevent it from occurring because you recognize the degree or the extent that your actions are going to take you. Okay. I imagine there'll be other consequences. This is bad press, bad PR for the security firm. Perhaps their contract will be reviewed, revisited. Mm-hmm. There certainly will be some form of commentary. And you're probably going to find Dollarama as an organization are going to want to take punitive actions against the company by saying, this now removes the contract or negates our ongoing relationship with you. Also, in the particular area that this is in, as I said, this is a heavy area comprised of a lot of homeless people. No one wants to be preyed upon. No one wants to be labeled or titled and that sort of thing. And I do understand there's slippage and there's shoplifting everywhere. I'm not saying this particular segment of the community will be responsible for that.
Right.
But in this particular case, and I think you said we've both been spat on professionally before.
Right.
You mentioned that before. I'm not being disingenuous when I say that.
Right.
I did not lose my professional mojo, my professional state of mind to take actions that I normally wouldn't do. I controlled myself. And I've been asked on the stand before, did my client anger you? Absolutely did, but I didn't take action on it. Why? I'm paid not to.
Okay. No, that's good, Steve. I want to bring us to a point right now about what we're seeing on the screen here, where Dollarama has quoted, they do not authorize the use of force in any situation. Now, something like this, that's when if I was to see that, I'd be like, okay, well, you kind of like really let us know what our work parameters are here, because that basically means do not engage with any force. Like literally what that means here, what I'm interpreting it to be for that matter. We have a client, I'm not going to reference who that client is, but they only want to utilize us in an observe and report capacity.
Right.
And whenever we notice anything, to just report up,
right.
And then they will instruct what the next move should be, the action is. In a situation here, when you sign a contract with a client and they've put something like this in place here, for the company to take this as face value and put it in their SOPs, when someone hearing this, because we talk lingo here, security and law enforcement all the time, but when the public is hearing this, when they say they do not authorize the use of force in any situation, Steve, can you just touch upon about that, what that could be interpreted?
Well, good question. You got my mind really turning on this. First of all, that is not necessarily a full explanation of what Dollaramas policy might be. It could be a brief segment just for the news clip. And there's context and there's content for any time. And policy cannot be usurped by legislation, provincial or federal legislation. So let's just cut right to the chase. Criminal code gives you authority to protect yourself if you're being attacked. We know that. Legislation-wise, there's the Occupier Liability Act, which holds you accountable to conduct of people. You're going to provide a level of safety. That level of safety might require intervention, engagement, and under circumstances that can be qualified, a need to apply force to protect. Sometimes protect you from yourself. I've seen people at times attempt self-harm, and we need to physically intervene and apply force on a person to prevent them from hurting themselves. That's not indicative of what we see here with the security guard. I'm not talking about punches and kicks and whatnot for something that you're not defending yourself, but you do have a right to be a protector, an expectation protector. If you see a person coming under attack and you don't provide reasonable steps to provide that, you can also be held accountable, sir, and litigated. So content and context, I'd love to speak to Dollarama to simply see exactly what they meant. But it's been my experience that the media will often usurp a comment and try to make it useful for their own particular segment, the news segment. That may not be totality the issue, because they have asked for a uniform presence to be seen. It's not like loss prevention. It's not like a non-uniform person.
Okay.
There's that presence. With that presence, especially in that demographic of that part of Toronto, there are times when you might need to take physical act to protect patrons, protect staff, and protect yourself. I don't know if that's the context that's applied herein.
Okay, no, this is good. See, if you have a segment in your program that specializes around the conversation of an action and how to navigate around use of force.
Yes.
Can you explain to someone listening how the use of force model works when it comes to being assaulted or attacked, or how it basically works in the sense that someone can be like, why don't you, I've heard people say, oh, if that happened to me, I take my baton out and just, So I think people need to understand how we are governed in this world around that model.
We did a podcast about a year ago on the brand new public police interactions training aid. And so just to recap of that, a use of force model does not give you permission to use force. It's merely a means to subjectively explain what you saw, what you felt was necessary, and what you did ultimately was reasonable. It has no standing in law. Law is law, and the use of force model does not augment law. So that's the first thing. So when we say breaches a use of force model, no, it breaches the criminal code. In this particular case, as I mentioned, the reference to the criminal code is the assault measures that the security guard was charged with. But the use of force model breaks it down for you in terms of how you, as a participant, sees a person's behavior. We start to gauge your level of response. I need to approach you with conflict prevention in mind and de-escalation steps in mind. So if there is a dispute whether or not you're being permitted at entry or I need you to leave, it's how I engage you, what I say to you to try to de-escalate the situation, not to try to villainize you, not try to threaten you, not try to give you ultimatums, but to try to point out to you context. I speak to you in probably the same tone, the same pitch of my words as I'm speaking to you and now. Realizing, of course, any situation can go awry, any situation can churn, but we need to take reasonable steps to prevent the application of force. That's what the training speaks to. And that's what's written in that model. And then the model talks about the level of force that you would apply based on the type of resistance. So a person spitting on you is an assault, but it doesn't have a lasting effect in terms of potential harm. And I'm not getting into the medical complications of a person's saliva. But I'm talking about if I'm coming at you and I try to strike you or kick at you or have a weapon in my hand, that raises the issues in terms of what you would be given the situation to do. I'm not certain what the guards here working at this Dollarama site have been provided in terms of tools. And I'm talking about perhaps an intermediate weapon, a baton, or handcuffs. Or if they don't. Or if they are provided training in de-escalation and management of their resistant behavior, or verbal skills, if you will. That would probably be vetted. It certainly will be in a court case. That's going to come out. In both CBC and both Global's clips, you have two plaintiff lawyers, each Jasmine Day and Mr. Hattie, speaking to you about there's training and expectations. And that's become a main point because as we've had another plaintiff lawyer speak to us, Mr. David Shelnut.
That's right.
And we did a podcast interview with that. He speaks to very clearly in security division the things that he's going to come after to look at. And the first thing is the areas of the training. And it's very difficult to defend your actions when you breach your own training policy. If you have no training, that could put the company into jeopardy and certainly put Dollarama into jeopardy. Okay, certainly long-winded here.
No, that's perfect. That's actually kind of where I want to end the segment. Is I want to kind of tie it in. So first of all, we've talked about an assault that happened. We call it an assault because an individual used an excessive amount of force. That's what we saw to deal with the situation. He was charged. What some major takeaways here are for anyone listening, whether you're working in security or law enforcement or anything of those parameters, if you step out of the realm of what you're supposed to be doing under your training, you could be really looking at some major consequences, which is what I want to kind of segue to.
Right.
But the training component is actually absolutely critical here because at the end of the day, based on what we're seeing here, there does not seem to be any sort of, if there was training, it was tossed out the window. That's what it would appear right now as it stands. But I think it's very important because a lot of times, if I look at when my kids were growing up, Steve, it'd be like, hey, listen, don't touch the stove because if you do and it's on, you're going to burn your hand, right? So there was fundamentals, but for them, the why was very important and to understand what not to do. For someone that could be faced with a situation like this, where someone spits on you, right? I think it's important that we talk a little bit about the consequences of what we're looking at here right now from a legal standpoint and also from a career standpoint, right? So there's three targets here, meaning as in there's three people that are going to face some sort of repercussion, potentially. There's the person that was involved with the situation, security. There was a security agency that hired the security. And there's the actual client, right? Hiring the agency. It's like a domino effect upwards, right?
Yes.
So can you just touch a little bit about what potentially, I mean, you see enough of these things. You're an expert witness, Steve. You've been involved in some major cases across Canada. What would be some things that you could potentially see happening if they were to be convicted? Can there be some uncomfort here happening for any of these parties?
Let's talk about two areas, two titles. First of all, criminal liability and the tort or vicarious liability. First of all, criminal. The security guard is now facing criminal charges. I ask the viewers to keep the following in mind. Obviously, this guard would be suspended or fired at this point. I'm not certain what his contractual obligations would be. Is there a requirement for the company when you've committed a criminal offense to keep you on the payroll? Likely not. I've seen other applications even throughout our own community where guards have been charged with something and they've been fired. So now we're talking about criminal defense. If you actually knew the requirement, the financial strain on you to acquire a criminal representation, it's going to be overwhelming. I likely would suspect that the security company will not be paying for that guard's criminal defense. I'd be surprised if they do. There's no legal requirement to do so. And it's one way for a company to somewhat wash their hands and move away from a person's actions. I'm not defending you. I will defend you when your actions are just, not when they're criminal nature. So that's the first area. So when you think about the sobering consequences of your actions, you're now not only unemployed, you now are going to have to acquire criminal defense. And the areas as to how much you earn might be the basis to whether you're able to acquire legal aid representation or not.
Right.
And what are the consequences going to be after this criminal offense, i.e. your criminal record, your ability to work, your ability to maintain income, et cetera, et cetera.
I mean, if you ever had any dreams of becoming a police officer,
yeah,
it might kind of wash those away potentially.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You just spat those away.
Right. Yeah.
All right. Secondly, we'll remove that.
Yeah.
Secondly, is the areas of litigation. Now, whether a person's homeless or not, you will have probably lawyers lining up to assist him.
Okay.
Who could be in that title? First of all, it's going to be the guard himself, the company, and likely Dollarama. Because the first issue, let's talk about Dollarama, would be as to how did you, let's see about your contractual obligation. And Mr. Shallon was talking about this in our podcast. Right. Let's look at the contract. I'm going to see the contract in the language where you have stated whether you want people just to observe and report or take reasonable means to prevent violence. All right, that's the first thing. Will be the issue of the training. What was the training provided to this guard? What is the training available for this company? If so, is it going to defend? If not, why not? Right. Next area would be to take a look at the security company itself. Was this person trained? Were they supervised? Were they given enough information to be able to work this particular site? Were they given a bit of an overview on the demographic? And why is it not all stores have security guards in the foyer? Some stores do. Why? What is the threat profile for this particular area? And do I have the resolve? And do I have the right personality blend where I'm not going to create a newsworthy item that's a nightmare for that company? All right. So that's going to be the areas. So you're probably going to see those areas. So the security company will be sued as well. Dollarama will be sued for the vetting and, of course, the guards. So there's going to be a lot of discomfort with that. It's going to be a basis likely of some form of consequence with the judgment and some form of award.
Okay.
And a punitive, perhaps.
No, Steve, that's very well said. And I think it's very important, that, like, for us as an organization, we're very calculated, and a lot of people want to retain our services, but we're always educating the client. Well, I can just go across the street and pay $24 an hour for a guard, or $23 or whatever. Right. And at the end of the day, it's like, okay, well, sometimes you got to educate the client. And I think actually for the agency that may be listening to this podcast, understand that if you're going to go in so low on to win the contract, and then you say then I don't have money for training, well, what you're about to watch right now is potentially a contract that could completely crush your company, literally, in the sense of when you start going through legal now. And that's the thing, Steve. I don't think entities are even paying attention to what's going to happen in the long term. Meaning, as in, sure, you can win a contract, you can put just a body in there in a uniform, but the world is not a place where it's all like peaches and cream and there's harmony. There's conflict and there's issues, and then you're going to have to deal with those issues. And if you're not equipped to deal with those issues, again, you're just creating a lot of issues. I see this for myself. I would never take on a contract, Steve. I'm just talking really off right now. Sure. Where I cannot win and get my people trained properly and make sure that they're compensated properly. And I'm not trying to spin off this segment here. All I'm saying is that there is a domino effect when a client chooses to pay the lowest amount. There is a domino effect that happens because how can you? I mean, I can do a segment on margins and what margins can be on what you pay minimum wage and what your billable rate is. But the reality is, I think it's important that clients are educated on the specifics, on making sure they know what they're hiring, what is involved. And we did a segment, what questions should a client be asking a security company before they hire them? Maybe we want to touch a little bit upon that really quick, Steve.
Yeah, here's the thing. There's a cost for training. There's a cost for negligence.
Yes.
It's just
exactly.
who you wish to pay to.
Right.
And, there again, I really love to defer to professional lawyers like David Shelnut. We can bring him back for another segment.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm certain he would. But he touched on in terms of what he looks for and what will end on allegations and what will not. And funny enough, he even quipped about the issues of training. Yeah, we'll shut him down if there's issues of training, or at least might be a layer of defense for a company. See, if they're looking at for negligence for a company, could be saying is you basically put this person out into the Dollarama for fodder. You did not provide him any matrix. You did not alert him to the type of person that he would having to deal with, and you left him to his own devices. That could be an allegation. But if I do provide a platform of training, and I've sold that to him, and I said, well, no, here's our training. He did not meet our training standard. We can see that. That's why we fired him.
Okay.
But it would be a layer of defense for the company, at least show that you had some form of training program or a package to show that what is the accepted decorum of behavior or not.
Okay.
Now, you shouldn't have to receive training for punching a person out of it, may say, based on anger. I think there's a lot of people that say, well, is that really a training issue? No, not necessarily. But what is a training issue is the areas of being able to say, I need de-escalation skills. I need how to take measures to control myself and not allow you to push my buttons to change my life. I don't think that security guard went to work that day thinking he'd become a newsworthy item and be facing consequences of extension of his duties. His life changed. Would a training made that difference? If the company provided training, they could be in a safer margin because that way it's a third-party litigation. But if not, they could be held on the hook for not giving your people skills. Okay,
Steve, look, I really want to thank you today what we went over. This has been, I think, a lot of insights for a client that may be like, hey, listen, I'm XYZ retail store or a restaurant, and I'm looking at what just happened with Dollarama. So as a client, there's some takeaways here for you to understand what you should look for in an agency, especially when it comes to what kind of training that they're receiving and who's providing that training, what exactly is the guard getting. That should be very clearly outlined. We talked about the actual security guard who was involved in the situation. If you're watching this and you're a security operator or agent, how do you navigate around situations? What can it mean for you? A lot of guys want to become cops and women want to become cops. Something like this could crush it. And again, there's a takeaway here. And of course, the other takeaway here, which I hope really hits home, is to the agencies that are watching this podcast, is that, pay a really good close audit on what your training is for your organization, if you have any. And if you don't, you should seek it immediately, because if you're doing that, you're going to play roulette with your organization. And I don't know about you, but I don't think throwing money towards lawyers as much as they want them to help defend you is something that you want to do. A lot of takeaways here, Steve. Any closing thoughts?
Yeah, this is, as we're filming this podcast, this is the first day of November 2024. And we're now getting into the season holiday shopping area. And there's a lot of corporate brands out there that hire security for seasonal purposes. And that prevent areas of slippage and, all the shoplifting and whatnot. But before you buy, before you hire, you might want to take a brief pause, because I don't need to be disingenuous when I say this, but you get in life what you pay for. And if I get the cheapest, the lowest rate possible, I think it's just the uniform. Well, see, having just the uniform may not be enough to prevent litigation against you. If you've taken some reasonable steps to say, yeah, the security guard, their company, we've been assured they have a basis level of training, that could take you out of a loop of some form of accountability, because the other side could argue that you took reasonable steps. Choose wisely, spend your money wisely, and let's avoid unnecessary incidents that can change your business path.
100%. Steve, again, thank you very much for coming down here, and I'll let you end the closing words of the show.
Stay safe, my friend.
All right, everyone. Take care. Have a great day.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for joining me in today's podcast. This podcast was created for protectors in the fields of law enforcement, executive protection, security, and anyone looking to level up their mindset. If you are learning from this podcast and you're enjoying it, please subscribe to our YouTube channel at The Sentinel Mindset. That's a zero-cost way to support us. In addition, please subscribe to the podcast both on Spotify and Apple. And on both Spotify and Apple, you can leave us up to a 5-star review. If you have questions for me or comments about the podcast, or guests you would like me to consider on The Sentinel Mindset, please post all comments on YouTube. I do read all the comments. Please also check out our sponsors, thearenatoronto.com. The Arena was created to help all those in the fields of law enforcement, security, and all that achieve their fitness goals. I want to thank our producer, Matthew Doyle, and creative supports, Jaslene Singh, who help me with this podcast every week. We value your feedback and are here to support you. Tune into the Sentinel Mindset every week where we look in the mirror to make real changes and explore what it takes to achieve greatness in your craft.
This podcast is brought to you by Executive Protection Lifestyle Canada. Make sure to drop by next week and don't forget to subscribe.